Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here this afternoon to talk about creating consistency, predictability, and then scale in your sales. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. I got a lot of information to share. And as one of my colleagues says, you are not listening at 1.5 times speed. It's just how fast he talks. So there is a chat function. If you have questions, please throw the questions in there. The way that we've set up this webinar today is I will be presenting for 25 to 30 minutes, and then we will have about 50 minutes of questions. I have a hard out at 2:30 p.m. Mountain Time today to address a family matter. So let's get right into it, and we will rock and roll from there. So who the heck am I? If you're in this session, you've probably seen some of my content at some point. I've got an amazing group of people, including Arden Lofsgaard and Nisha Berman, who support me in getting that content out there. I was the first multi-time author in the Sandler network. Sandler is the largest leadership and sales development company in the world, currently operating in over 30 countries. Harvard integrated all of our content into their MBA program in about 2019. Kind of had to start somewhere. So my books are on accountability and change, topics no one likes to talk about, but as leaders have told me, very, very important. I was also the first and to this day only Canadian recipient of the David H. Sandler Award back in 2020, which was both a nomination and a vote of my peers. And then lastly, I have been hosting a podcast, which will be 3 years, is coming in October, called Full Funnel Freedom. It is for entrepreneurs and sales leaders who want to create the freedom that comes with having a consistently, reliably full funnel. And this week we had Julie Holmes from the United Kingdom on talking about AI and sales leadership. So find that every Monday, wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube. Now, most people, when they hear about Sandler or they know a bit about Sandler, they think training. Well, yes, and that's part of how we support our clients. Ultimately, though, our clients are not paying us for training, they're paying us for results. And so for this webinar and for this group, I'm going to guess that the second and third option or outcomes are the most important. So that consistent, repeatable, sustainably scalable revenue engine and a business they can sell for their number, not the number they're told to take. And I have a partner who does those exits, and I'm currently working through their certified exit guide course. So before we get into real content, I'm going to share with you 3 different types of revenue organizations and why they might be not the best or why they might be good for us to set up to create consistency, predictability, and scale. First one, the green field. Beautiful. Love the green field. Except what this often looks like is, hey, welcome aboard. Go sell stuff. My door is always open. Click. So with no boundaries, our sellers are going to default to what they're comfortable doing. And that may not actually be the best way to get us to scale. It's definitely not going to create consistency or repeatability. The second one, you can all probably imagine by the picture, this is not an ideal scenario. This is very, very dictator-like, controlling churn, expanding. Oh, by the way, keep your CRM up to date. And by the way, CRMs are important. We're going to talk about those later. However, when our sellers feel like they are being put in handcuffs, they're not going to be productive and they're not going to be consistent, predictable, or scalable. Now, this sales org, on the other hand, has level playing field. It has clearly defined boundaries. We give the freedom to our sellers within these boundaries to perform in the way that makes them feel the best and makes it sound like them. So they're not trying to read off of scripts that makes them sound like they went to a sales training class and have a shiny new toy to try out. And we also help our sellers understand how we are going to support them. They're not allowed to manage up. We hired them for a reason. If we're going to go out and do the sales for our company, why do we have the sellers? So this is our ideal sales org, and this is what's ultimately going to create that consistency, predictability, and scale as you grow your business. The first thing we got to do is build a solid foundation. First thing is that clearly identified ideal client profile that everyone agrees on and can articulate. And that's important And you've probably heard lots of stuff about ideal client profiles, ICPs before. However, in my experience, when I've gone and talked to sales teams after the entrepreneur or the sales leader has said, oh yeah, we have a clearly identified ICP, you'd probably be shocked to know that I get a lot of very different answers. And we need everyone to be able to articulate what our ideal client profile looks like, because everybody in our organization is potentially meeting those ideal buyers. And yes, they're definitely not going to start a sales conversation, much less close something on the side of the soccer pitch or at the hockey arena or at the dance recital or at the play. However, they can at least have a conversation, say, hey, I wonder if you'd be open to a conversation with someone from my company, because the things you're telling me that are problems for you in your role are things that we've helped people solve. We need to get data. We need to get data, 30 days of proactive data from our sellers. So this is not a way to micromanage them. This is to say, go track what makes you awesome already. Whatever you do right now that is getting you to the results that you're getting, we need to know that, because we want to replicate it. We want to show everybody else how awesome you are. Because if we don't have data, there is no way to create predictability at scale. And then lastly, we need a consistent cadence of check-ins and checkouts. This is talked about in my first book on accountability, and it means that we are actually freeing us and our sellers out to go grow our businesses, as opposed to every day going, hey, Hamish, what are you doing now? Hey, Hamish, what are you working on? Hey, Hamish, what's going on with this opportunity? We have a 5-minute check-in on Monday. We have a 15-minute checkout on Friday. Yes, there'll be coaching calls and sales funnel review meetings throughout the week. And when we start our week well and we wrap up our week well, our sellers feel like we trust them, and they're much more likely to go out and produce for us. So what is an ideal client? Obviously small to large, we can see that. If we think about squirrels, now from experience, most entrepreneurs at whatever stage we start working with them tend to be squirrel farmers. And by the way, I was a squirrel farmer, right? As all entrepreneurs, we have to start out somewhere. However, if we don't let those squirrels go over time or grow them over time, we're actually doing us and our business a disservice. Now, we can certainly look at rabbits. Yeah, okay. Deer, bear, and elephant. Now, these are the standard ones we present to our clients when we're working with a client on sustainable sales growth. We get our clients to customize these names to their world so they're more resonant with them and their team. And we had a vegetarian client once, it was like radishes and watermelons. We had a client with a nautically themed name, and they did tugboats and oil tankers. Whatever it is that creates that common language so everybody's on the same page, that's what's going to create scale. Now, of course, as we look at this, we already talked about squirrels are too small, elephants are too big. It doesn't mean don't hunt elephants. Also, don't stake your whole quarter or year on an elephant coming in. As one of my coaches says, elephants are really, really smart and they move really, really slow. And I've met too many sellers who are hanging their sales target on and achieving their sales target on closing an elephant. And usually what they ended up with is heartache and tears. What we really want our sellers to focus on is the deer and the bear, because typically their sales cycles are smaller and the growth expansion opportunities are larger. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we get to KARE. So if you want to do more color-coded, we want to stay in the green. Deers, bears. Now, you may have sellers who are rabbit hunters. One of our longtime sales leaders in a previous role, they had a seller who frustrated them on a continual basis for a couple of reasons. One is their performance roller coastered, right? 1 month they're at the high, second month they're at the low, copy, paste, repeat. Also, all they were comfortable chasing was rabbits. And by the way, that might be a seller that will get you from early stages to a later stage, and that'll be great. However, we also need to remember who got us here might not get us there. And so if we identify that we've got a member of our team who was great early on and is no longer a good fit for our company, we need to celebrate them and let them go be more successful elsewhere. But ultimately, though, we want to stick with deers and bears. For data example, this is for real client data. When we went in and analyzed, you can see the client count and you can see the share of revenue. So ideal again is bears, typical is deers, acceptable is rabbits, squirrels are the ones that are too small. So this client was an entrepreneur who was squirrel farming with that 24% of the client count, and 62% of the revenue was coming from their ideal clients or their bears. Now, I'm bad at math, but I kind of think I know where I want me and my sellers to be spending our time in pursuit of new opportunities. Fair? Here's another bit of data from this same company. Acceptable, typical, and ideal average annual revenue. Now, I can't see you all today, so I will not ask for a show of hands. Give me a nod if you think that the ideal sale is about the same amount of time and effort from a seller as the acceptable deal. Yeah. Now, it may be a couple of days longer or a week longer. However, again, bad at math, but I think I'd rather have my sellers focused on the $500,000+ annual deals instead of the acceptable deals that they're essentially spending the most time on. However, if we have not created clarity with our sellers on where they're going to spend their time, they will spend their time where they are most comfortable. Quick public service announcement for all of you. This is not a deer. You might have been tried, when you were in sales, or one of your sellers may have tried to tell you that this looks like a deer, and it's not. So clearly define those ideal client profiles, understand what the sales cycles look like, and support your sellers in spending time with the right opportunities so they can grow and scale your business. There's two things you can't do without data. The first one is coach. If we try to coach our sellers without data, it's kind of like saying, well, Hamish, my tummy thinks that you're not doing so well. And our tummies are not good judges of performance or suitability to join our team. Because that's the other side that entrepreneurs, when they're hiring sellers or sales leaders, they tend to go with their gut and don't really have a process set up. And I will tell you that also tends to end up in heartache and tears. The other thing we can't do without data is scale. So I'll talk about this a bit more when we get to the section on CRMs. We had a client who had a $500 billion exit, that is with a B. And one of the reasons that they were told by the private equity firm who acquired them that they were getting the multiple they were getting is because of the data that existed. And I'll save the rest of that tale for when we get to the CRM section. So overall, right now, if you are not tracking data, if you don't have data to coach your sellers to, well, that's why we get the 30 days of proactive data. And that's why we build in KPIs and we create proactive sales plans for our sellers to follow that we then use in our check-ins and checkouts to help them stay on course. An airplane is off course 98% of the time. Even flying Calgary to Vancouver, it's like a 54-minute flight and it's still off. Now, it's matters of degree, and the autopilot or the human pilots will do the course corrections. However, if they weren't doing that, the plane could end up in Anchorage just because those little matters of degree add up over time. So by doing these check-ins and checkouts and using real data, we help our sellers understand that they have they are on course or off course, and if they're off course, we can correct it before it becomes a major issue. Speaking of KPIs, so there are 3 KPIs that will encourage all of you to be following. I was actually shared these on a executive coaching call with the head of an engineering firm we've worked with for a number of years this morning. So first KPI is first conversations ever. The first time a seller has a conversation with a buyer about something they sell. So if you have 2 products and a client is buying product A and your seller talks to them about buying product B, that is the first conversation ever. What the first conversations ever KPI tells our sellers to do is keep things going into the top of the funnel. Because eventually, if we don't keep putting things in the top of the funnel, our funnel is going to start to more than likely look like a stomach in an antacid commercial, which is not very fun for any of us. Second KPI, opportunities move down or out of the funnel. Now, The reason why we want to do this is it keeps the seller focused on keeping motion. Again, we don't want funnel bloat, or some people call it funnel constipation. So if we have a KPI of how many opportunities are moving down or out of the funnel, now could be out because it was disqualified, or it could be out because that prospect became a client. We want our funnels to be consistently looking like a funnel. And the last one is coverage. Coverage is how much do we need in our funnel at all time to hit our target. So for super simple arithmetic, and as one of my engineering clients once said, it's not math, it's arithmetic. So it's arithmetic. For super simple arithmetic, if we have a $1 million target to close this year, and our close rate is 50%, we need to have $2 million in funnel at all times. And some of you might think, well, as you get closer to the year and you get closer to the end of the year, I mean, that's going to change. Well, yes, except the world's not going to end on December 31st. A lot of sellers sometimes think that. They take their foot off the gas come the beginning of December or the beginning of June, and all of a sudden come September or January, they're having the, oh no, I'm so far behind. And then they start to do a whole bunch of frantic motion that doesn't actually do anything other than end up getting your sellers to sell your stuff at a discount for no reason other than they took their foot off the gas. So defining coverage. Now, some of you are thinking, hey, I don't know these numbers. Great. That's part of the 30 days, right? So in the 30-day data, track how many first conversations ever, track how many opportunities are moved down and out. And there'll be a few other things that I'll get to on another slide. And then in terms of coverage, what we tell our clients is, if you don't know your close rate, that's fine. A very quick acid test is how many opportunities out of 10. I've yet to meet an entrepreneur or a sales leader or a seller who could not calculate how many opportunities they close out of every 10 real opportunities. Real opportunities, not the ones where it says, hey, we're always interested in, or how about you come in and do a lunch and learn, but a real qualified opportunity. How many opportunities out of every 10 real qualified ones do you close? That's your close rate. If you don't know, use 50% for now and track that data over time. Now, the next thing that we also want to do is create this proactive sales plan. Sandler calls this a cookbook. Now, what we do in a cookbook is we set monthly goals and we track them weekly. Again, check-in, check-outs. We want to make sure our seller is continuing to be on pace. If we set monthly goals and only track them once a month, our seller could be way off course and we wouldn't even know about it. Now, there's a combination in your cookbook of KPIs, and you'll see some of theirs in there with the conversations in the initial prospect meeting. This is an example from a real client. So they name things different than what I just shared with first conversations ever. There's also proactive activities. Key thing is proactive activities, which means we or our seller controls whether or not we can have a conversation with the buyer. So blasting out 4,000 emails, which by the way, Google and Yahoo pretty much killed last year, doesn't necessarily work. So dials, new contracts, networking events, center of influence meeting, those are behaviors, not new contracts. Dials and emails, networking events, center of influence meeting, those are proactive activities that we can set up for our sellers. And of course, at the bottom, we have monthly sales because we want to make sure, are we on pace? Now, some of you are in a longer sales cycle, right? Your sales cycle is 3, 6, 9, 18, 24, 36 months. Awesome. You still got to keep the lights on every month. You still got to pay your people. And so if we're not tracking monthly sales and we're just waiting for those giant wads of cash to come in, it can create a lot of uncertainty. And one of the things that human beings abhor is uncertainty. And we try to go seek certainty. So if our situation with our current employer is uncertain, we are more likely to be going in and looking for something that we feel is more certain rather than trying to create certainty in our current role. So putting this all together, this is how we create consistency. If we are consistent on our cookbooks, we're consistently hitting our KPIs, over time, we're going to start to create some predictability because we can model things back and say, oh, we modeled this back. And we can see that if our sellers are consistently doing these behaviors and hitting these KPIs, we can predict that our revenues and our cash flows are going to look like this. And ultimately, that comes down to accountability. Now, some people don't like accountability, so instead think of the word ownership. So this is my friend and mentor, Gord, who actually introduced me to Sandler. He was my last sales manager. He used to say to all of us on his sales team, own your book of business like it's your own organization. So when you're talking to your sellers and you don't necessarily like the word accountability, talk about ownership and instill an ownership mindset in them so that they are going out and consistently doing those behaviors. And if they're not, that's a separate conversation that's beyond the scope of our call today. All right, so let's go to CRMs. Now, I imagine that you've experienced this CRM. If you have any experience with CRMs, especially in larger organizations, they'll have a CRM that looks like this. You may also have the CRM that looks like this. This is very common with entrepreneurial organizations, right? They invested in the CRM and they got trained and no one used it. And by the way, that's okay, because at least this is a bit of an easier place to start from than the other one to untangle everything. So when we are looking at our CRMs, what do we have in place as a common naming scheme, as requirements for the CRM to ultimately create CRM serenity? So before I started in Sandler, I was working for a company called Canada Newswire. And one day they came to me and said, hey, in addition to being our senior new business development person in Western Canada, you're also going to be on the team that decides whether we implement SAP or Salesforce. And I was like, okay, I want to help, sure. So we did that, and then they said, great, now that you've chosen Salesforce, you're also on the team that gets to implement it nationally. Oh, by the way, you still got to go hit your sales target, but now you're going to go do this too. Okay, well, the only way that we ultimately got to 67% adoption nationally across the sales team was we tied everything to compensation. If it didn't live in the CRM, it didn't exist. Now, Sandler is actually a partner of HubSpot now. So I have my colleagues designing our clients' sales processes within their HubSpot instance, which is pretty cool. Whether you're a client of Sandler or not, I can make that introduction to HubSpot so you can get a HubSpot instance if you are looking for a CRM. Now, my client who had the $500 billion exit, the punchline to the tale is that one of the private equity members said to the global VP of sales, the reason why we're giving you this multiple is because you have your CRM so locked down in a good way that we can see how you got from where you started to here. And we can actually now model predictability forward that we're going to get our multiple when we eventually want to sell this business again. So by having a CRM that was consistently used by the team with a common naming scheme, a common expectation around entries and data in the CRM, the company was able to get acquired for a higher multiple. Now, there was other things that went into that multiple, of course, but one of the things that the PE firm really looked at was the fact that they could actually model forward, because in their experience, a lot of the time it was, I don't know, we just sell stuff and we make money, buy us. And that's not going to get a very good multiple. When we're thinking of our CRM, we want no surprises. So again, whether it's you or your sellers, instill a no surprises mindset. So I don't want to see a bunch of opportunities land in my CRM the last couple of days of the month or the last couple of days of the quarter because, oh, they just called us and they said they needed something. Not true. There is a process that went through. It's very rare, especially in B2B, where a non-client, if it's a current client who calls up and says, hey, can you send me a pallet of this, or can I add 10 more seats to that, or we've hired 3 more people and we need to expand our benefits plan, whatever that might be. If it's a net new client, it is incredibly rare that they pop up and sign a deal in short order. Usually that seller has been holding on to that opportunity and waiting to see if it's going to cross the finish line. So if it does, surprise, they're the good kid. And if it doesn't, they get to save it for next quarter and hit their number. So ultimately, no surprises in the pipeline creates CRM serenity. I don't know if any of you who were watching remember the television news cliche that was, "It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?" Well, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your sellers are? If you haven't given them any guidance, they're probably hanging out in the keeps. So on the advertisement for this, we talked about the KARE model, which stands for keep, attain, recapture, and expand. So attains are net new, never done business with them. Recaptures are organizations that we have done business with in the past that we are not currently doing business with. Now, that could be because we lost them a competitor. It could be because we're project-based and they had a project, they don't have a project yet. We want to recapture that business when they do. And the expands are not only our greatest opportunities to grow their current clients with the greatest opportunity to grow, buy more from us, they're also our competitors' number one prospects. We need to have a system and a process for locking down those expands, which is outside of the scope of our conversation today. The keep accounts are the ones who are buying all they are ever going to buy from you. Now, it could be because they're buying literally everything that you sell, or because at their size, maybe they're a rabbit, they're only buying the one or two services or products from you that they're really going to buy. However, they're also the ones that our sellers like to hang out with because they say, "Oh, we love you guys. You guys are great. Thanks again for the free lunch," except there's no opportunities to grow those accounts. So when we're creating predictability, we need to have our sellers focused on the attains, recaptures, and expands. Now, if you're early on in your entrepreneurial journey, you may not have any recaptures yet. They'll come eventually. And we never want to take the keeps for granted, right? They're the ones keeping our lights on. We never take the keep accounts for granted. And they are also not going to scale our organization. So if you don't know where your sellers are, I'm going to tell you that they're probably hanging out with the keep accounts because they're safe and warm and comfortable. Have them focus on the attains and expands, recaptures if you have them, and you're much more likely to hit that scale number that you're seeking to do or that you've committed to hitting for your investors. So I'm going to wrap up here with talking about growth. And this is data from another real client. The names have been changed to protect the guilty. So those Simpsons fans out there, we were not working with an organization that hired Simpsons characters. This organization also did not sell umbrellas, shovels, beach balls, and sunscreen. I don't want you to get too deep in the data, but I did want you to see the whole table expanded out. What I want to share with you is when we first started talking to this company and the executive had invited us in for, as part of their annual planning, to talk about sales strategy, sales growth for the next year. And they were asked, hey, what growth do you plan for next year? And they said 6%. And we said, well, why 6%? They said, well, because of the market and all that kind of stuff, which, by the way, pegging yourself to the market or the industry, that's called average. That's called average. And no one seeks to be aggressively average. What we discovered, or what the executive discovered in going through this exercise, is they had 421% growth organically by selling other services to people who were already buying from them. 421% with zero net new. That's what 421% annual growth looks like using $1 million as a baseline versus 6%. And of course, a majority of you are thinking, well, Hamish, yeah, great, but they're not going to hit 421% growth. 100% agree with you. 100% agree with you, because out of all those clients who still are buying from our client and their clients, and those clients love our client, they're still not going to buy everything that our client goes and pitches to them. Let's say that they only hit 25% of that projected growth. Now, again, bad math, but that kind of sounds like a little bit over 100% growth year over year with zero net new. Take a minute and jot down to yourself, what would it mean to your organization? What would the payoff be to the organization if you got 105% growth in 12 months? Pretending, by the way, that you can deliver on all of it. Okay, because there's at least one person who's thinking, oh, well, if I did that, I wouldn't be able to deliver. You can deliver. Okay, you can deliver. Write down, what would the payoff to your organization be if you did 100+% annual growth in the next 12 months? What would that payoff be to your organization? And once you've had a chance to write down the payoff to the organization, what would the payoff be to you personally? What would it allow you to do? Could you get out of doing the business and maybe work on the business as a true owner? Would it allow you to possibly sell the business, possibly exit the business? I don't know, but write it down. Write it down. And if it's worth a conversation, I'll give you a way to connect with me at the end of our time today before we get to Q&A. So here's our takeaways for today. I mentioned this earlier. A leader's number one job is to create clarity. If we have not created clarity, we talked about with ideal client profiles. Our team is going to do what feels most comfortable to them, which is probably not the right option. If we don't build a strong foundation first, we are not going to be able to scale effectively. We will not be creating consistency. We will not create predictability, and we definitely won't scale. Speaking of that, we need data. The only way to coach or scale effectively is with data. And it might feel to our sellers micromanaging. I'll tell you, that is a yellow or red flag. When anybody pushes back on tracking what makes them awesome, they are probably not a good fit for your organization, because real A players, real high achievers want to show you how awesome they are. They do. They want to show you how awesome they are. And if you get someone who puts up their hand and goes, hey, boss, I don't need you to know what I'm doing. Well, because you're probably not doing what I hope you're doing. I mentioned these last two already. Ownership is a synonym for accountability. If you don't like the word accountability, talk about ownership. And instill in your team that you want no surprises in the pipeline. No surprises. You need to see how things moved from hi, nice to meet you, to looking forward to working with you. And by the way, that can be one conversation. You know, net new, a current client who calls up and orders more, great, log it. Show us what that progression looked like so we can repeat it. All right. There's a QR code you can use to access my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to connect with me. Mention that you saw me speak at Scale Up, so I know where we connected from. And our first step will be to have a 15-minute video call to discover if we like each other enough to ever want to talk again, and to help me understand a bit more about your organization. And I'll share with you a bit more about how we support our clients in creating consistency, predictability, and scale. So thank you very much for having me in today. I've got about 10 minutes for questions before I have a hard out to address a family matter. And I would love to take questions from the group right now. Put them in the chat, and I will answer any questions I can. And if I can't, I'd love to connect with you offline. Any suggestions on pain? Yes. Yeah. I hope it's Leanna. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of talking about compensation. I've got a couple of articles about that. I really firmly believe, especially if you are in a longer sale, we do need to have some kind of a base, right? Base plus, because especially with the way that things have increased in price, mortgages, rents, fuel, etc., our sellers need to feel somewhat stable. Now, I don't want them to feel completely stable, because that's going to mean that they're probably going to be stuck in their comfort zones. Long sales cycle can be volatile. So I believe in a base plus model. Now, depending on the dollar value, the length of sale, et cetera, those are going to change on the percentages, and some of it might be more of a flat, right? So you have a spiff, or you have a flat incentive that is paid on a more regular basis. So one of the things that we coach all of the leaders that we work with to do is tie commission also to the completion of their cookbook. Because if a seller gets a whale land on their lap first month of the quarter. I have witnessed this over and over again. I might have done it myself, where I just put my feet up on my desk and go, nailed it this quarter. And then, of course, by the time I get to the other quarter, my pipeline is now super skinny. So if a seller does not hit green on their cookbook, which means they hit 95% or above of their behaviors and their KPIs, they don't actually get full commission. Now, for some of our clients in longer sales cycles, they will actually pay a cookbook bonus, where if the seller is consistently hitting their behaviors and their KPIs, they will get a small dollar value every month. This frustrates CFOs because they'll say, well, we're paying them, like, why are we bonusing them on the role they're supposed to play? The reason why we do that is because we keep them motivated, right? We keep them going through that long, potentially volatile sales cycle. And if it's really necessary, we can deduct those small monthly payments from their ultimate commission if the dollar value is higher. Now, that is a very, very general answer, Leanna. I appreciate that to a fairly complex question. So I hope I gave you some insight on that, and certainly happy to connect with you offline to talk a little bit further. We've done plenty of. So if we want to, so if we're paying this like this cookbook bonus, if you will, every month, if they hit green every month, then we ultimately deduct that from the commission if the dollars are large enough, right? So if the dollars are large enough, we deduct the monthly cookbook bonus from their ultimate commission. That's a CFO thing. Sometimes that's how you get it by CFOs. Sometimes you don't have to do that, but that's sort of your last lever to pull if the CFO is really resistant to the cookbook bonuses, is tell them that it's an advance on commission, and then that usually helps them go through. So thank you for that great question, Leanna. I hope I gave you some sort of insight that is useful for you. And again, please feel free to connect with me offline. I am the world's #1 result for Hamish Knox in Google. So you'll likely find my LinkedIn profile if you type in Hamish Knox, and especially if you put in Hamish Knox Calgary, you'll definitely find me. All right, other questions that we've got. So I will put that QR code back up on the screen as well. So if any of you want to grab that QR code and connect with me on LinkedIn, again, please put a message in that says that you saw me at Scale Up Week on practice day, so I know where we connected from. And then our next step will be book a 15-minute video call to talk in more detail about what sort of support you're looking for, and if we're the potentially can be able to deliver that support to you to sustainably scale your sales. All right, so I very much appreciate you investing some of your time with me today to learn how to create consistency, predictability, and scale in your organizations. I look forward to connecting with you offline sometime soon. And until we do then, go lead. Take care, everybody.